I found the email notification in my spam folder at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, which probably saved the HOA from getting sued into oblivion before I even had my morning coffee. The subject line read, "Important Lake Renaming Ceremony this Saturday." And I stared at it for a solid 30 seconds before my brain processed what I was reading. My family's private lake. The one my great-grandfather had dug in 1947. The one that sat entirely on property my family had owned for 78 years before Meadowbrook Commons, HOA, even existed. They were renaming it. I clicked the email with fingers that had gone cold. "Dear residents," it began, and I already wanted to throw my phone across the room because I wasn't just a resident. "We are thrilled to announce that Clearwater Lake will be renamed Morrison Financial Solutions Lake in honor of our generous corporate sponsor. The naming rights ceremony will take place this Saturday at 10 a.m. Light refreshments will be served. Please join us in celebrating this exciting partnership that will fund numerous community improvements." Clearwater Lake. They had already renamed it once, apparently. The lake my family called Harrison Lake, after my great-grandfather William Harrison Jenkins, who had paid to have it dug, stocked with fish, and maintained for nearly 3 decades before passing it down to my grandfather. I sat there in my home office, the glow of my computer screen the only light in the room, and felt something hot and sharp twist in my chest. My wife Sarah was already asleep upstairs. My dad lived 2 streets over in the same neighborhood, having moved here 5 years ago specifically because this was family land, family history. My grandfather's house had stood where the community center now sat, torn down in 1995, but the lake remained. Always the lake. I forwarded the email to my father, typed, "Did you see this?" and hit send. My phone rang 14 seconds later. "They did what?" Dad's voice was rough with sleep and disbelief. "Apparently sold naming rights to our lake." "That's not their lake to name, William. You know that's not their lake." "I know, Dad, I know. Your grandfather's deed specifies that lake. It's on our property. When we sold the parcels for development back in '98, we kept the lake and the surrounding 3 acres. The HOA has an easement for resident access. That's it. They don't own it." I was already pulling open the filing cabinet in my office, the one that held all our property documents. "I've got the deed here somewhere, the one from when you transferred ownership to me in 2019. I've got your grandfather's original from 1947 and the transferred deed from when your great-grandfather's estate passed to him in 1951. I'll bring everything over first thing tomorrow morning." "Dad, it's almost midnight, and they're having a ceremony on Saturday. That gives us 4 days. Son, 4 days to fix this before they plaster some corporation's name all over our family's lake." I pulled the deed from the folder, spread it across my desk. There it was, clear as day. 3.2 acres including man-made lake, constructed 1947, commonly known as Harrison Lake. The property boundaries were clearly marked. The lake sat dead center of those boundaries. "I'm coming over now," Dad said. "Dad, no, Sarah's asleep. Let's meet for breakfast tomorrow, 7 a.m. at Rosie's Diner." He was quiet for a moment. "Okay, 7 a.m. Bring that deed. We're going to need to make copies of everything." I barely slept. I kept thinking about Saturday mornings at that lake when I was a kid, learning to fish with my grandfather. He'd been 73 years old, patient as stone, showing me how to cast without tangling the line. He told me stories about his father digging that lake, how it had taken 8 months and every spare penny he had after coming back from the war. How he'd wanted a place where the family could gather, could find peace. "A man's legacy isn't in buildings or money," Grandpa William had told me. "It's in what he creates that brings people together. This lake, William, this is our family's heart." Now, some HOA president was trying to name it after a financial services company. At 6:45 a.m., I was sitting in a booth at Rosie's with 3 folders of documents spread in front of me. Dad walked in at 6:50, carrying a leather portfolio that had been Grandpa's. His face was set in lines I recognized, the same expression he got when he was preparing for battle. Dad had been a real estate attorney for 40 years before retiring. If anyone knew property law, it was him. "I've been up since 3, he said, sliding into the booth. "Called Tom Morrison, actually, the guy whose company supposedly bought the naming rights." "And?" He had no idea it was privately owned. Said the HOA president, a woman named Deborah Patterson, approached him 6 months ago with a proposal. Professional presentation, glossy brochures, the whole 9 yards. She told him the HOA owned the lake and was looking for corporate partnerships to fund community improvements. He wrote a check for $50,000. I whistled low. 50 grand for naming rights to a suburban neighborhood lake? He runs a financial planning company with offices in 3 states. He grew up in Wisconsin, has fond memories of lake life. Thought it would be good local marketing, a way to give back to the community. Dad opened his portfolio. He's not the bad guy here, William. He's a victim of fraud just like we are. Fraud? The HOA doesn't own the lake. They can't sell naming rights to property they don't own. That's fraud. That's theft by deception. When I explained the situation, Tom went quiet for about a minute, then said he wanted his money back and wanted to help us fix this however he could. The waitress came by, poured coffee, took our breakfast orders. After she left, Dad spread out the documents. 3 deeds spanning 3 generations. Great-grandfather William Thomas Jenkins to grandfather William Harrison Jenkins, grandfather to father Walter Jenkins, father to me, William Joseph Jenkins. We've all got the same initials, I said, touching the oldest deed gently. The paper was yellowed, fragile, but the ink was still clear. 4 generations of WJ. Your grandfather was proud of that, said it made us a unit, a continuous line. Dad pulled out a more recent document. This is the property division agreement from 1998, when we sold the parcels for development. Look at Section 4, subsection B. I read it carefully. The property owners retain full ownership of the 3.2-acre parcel designated as Lot 1A, including all water rights, mineral rights, and naming rights to the man-made lake. An easement is granted to the Meadowbrook Commons HOA for resident access to the lake for recreational purposes only. Said access does not constitute transfer of ownership or control. Naming rights, Dad repeated, tapping the page. Your mother insisted on that clause. She knew HOAs could get power happy, wanted to make sure they couldn't decide to rename your grandfather's lake on a whim. Mom had passed away in 2003, but even from beyond the grave, she was looking out for the family. I felt a surge of gratitude and grief mixed together. So what's our play? I asked. First, we go to the HOA board meeting. That's tonight at 7. We present the deeds, explain the situation calmly and professionally, and give them a chance to cancel Saturday's ceremony and return Tom Morrison's money. And if they don't? Dad's expression went hard. Then we get attorneys involved. We file for an injunction to stop the ceremony. We pursue legal action for fraud, breach of easement terms, and anything else we can make stick. But I'd rather not go nuclear right away. These are our neighbors. Deborah Patterson may be misguided or may have made a genuine mistake. I thought about the email, the professional presentation Tom Morrison had mentioned. You don't really believe it was a mistake, do you? No, Dad admitted. But I believe in giving people a chance to do the right thing before we destroy them. The HOA meeting was held in the community center, a modern building with too much glass and not enough character. About 30 people were scattered across the folding chairs when we arrived at 6:55. Deborah Patterson sat at the front table with 4 other board members. She was maybe 55, blonde hair cut in a precise bob, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. I recognized her. She'd moved into the neighborhood 3 years ago, into one of the McMansions on the north side. She'd introduced herself to Sarah and me at a community barbecue, mentioned she was retired from corporate management and looking for ways to stay active. HOA president seemed like a natural fit for someone like her, someone who needed to be in charge of something. Good evening, everyone, Deborah said at exactly 7 p.m. Let's begin tonight's meeting. First on the agenda, we have final preparations for Saturday's lake naming ceremony. Dad and I were sitting in the back row. He nudged me, whispered, "Let her finish her presentation. Then we speak." Deborah pulled up a PowerPoint presentation on the screen behind her. The first slide showed a rendering of a fancy sign reading, Morrison Financial Solutions Lake, with landscaping and solar lighting. As you all know, this partnership with Morrison Financial Solutions represents a significant investment in our community. The $50,000 donation will fund new playground equipment, resurface the tennis courts, and provide matching funds for our holiday lighting display. A few people clapped. I gripped the folder in my lap tighter. The ceremony on Saturday will be catered by Gourmet Solutions, and we'll have a ribbon cutting at the new sign, which is being installed Friday afternoon. We've invited local media, and this represents a wonderful opportunity to showcase Meadowbrook Commons as a forward-thinking community. More applause. My jaw was starting to ache from clenching it. "Are there any questions about the ceremony?" Deborah asked, looking pleased with herself. Dad stood up. "I have a question about the lake itself." Deborah's smile didn't waver. "Yes, Mr. Jenkins?" "Can you provide documentation showing that the HOA has legal ownership of the lake and the authority to sell naming rights?" The room went quiet. Deborah's smile tightened at the edges. "The lake is community property, accessible to all residents." "Accessible, yes, but owned by the HOA? Can you provide a deed?" "I don't have the paperwork with me at this exact moment, but I assure you everything is in order. The HOA has managed the lake since the community was established." I stood up beside my father. "You manage access through an easement. You don't own the property." Deborah's expression shifted, a crack showing in her polished demeanor. "And you are?" "William Jenkins, Walter's son. My great-grandfather dug that lake in 1947. My family has owned the property continuously since then. We have the deeds to prove it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Deborah's fellow board members were exchanging glances, looking confused. "I'm not sure where you're getting your information," Deborah said, her voice taking on a patronizing tone. "But the lake is community property. It's been used by residents for decades." "Used through an easement agreement," Dad repeated, moving to the front of the room. "An easement my family granted in 1998 when we sold the parcels for development. We retained ownership of the lake specifically. Would you like to see the deed?" He placed the documents on the table in front of Deborah. She didn't look at them, just kept her eyes fixed on Dad's face. "These could be forgeries," she said. The room erupted. People were on their feet talking over each other. One of the board members, a thin man in his 60s, picked up the deeds and started reading. "Deborah," he said quietly, "these look legitimate." "Frank, we've been over this. The lake is community property." "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "I have Tom Morrison's number right here. We spoke with him this morning. He'd be happy to confirm that he had no idea the lake was privately owned when you sold him naming rights to property that isn't yours to sell." Deborah's face went pale, then flushed red. "That's absurd. I did my due diligence." "Really?" Dad's voice was calm, but carried an edge that made people stop talking and listen. "Because I spent 40 years as a real estate attorney, and I'd love to see your title search, your ownership documentation, any of the due diligence you claim to have done. Because from where I'm standing, you committed fraud. You sold something you don't own, accepted $50,000 in payment, and planned to install a permanent sign on my son's property without permission." "This is harassment," Deborah snapped. "Security. I want these men removed." "There's no security here, Deborah," Frank said wearily, "and I think we need to hear them out. I'm looking at a deed from 1947, a transfer deed from 1951, another from 1987, another from 2019. They all clearly describe a 3.2-acre parcel, including a man-made lake. The property boundaries match our community maps. The lake sits on Lot 1A, which according to this 1998 development agreement was retained by the Jenkins family." Another board member, a woman in her 40s with dark hair, leaned over to read the documents. "Oh my God, Deborah, did you even look at the original property records?" "Of course I did. The lake is surrounded by HOA property. It's used by all residents. That makes it community property." "That's not how property law works," Dad said. "Use doesn't equal ownership. We granted an easement for access. That's it. You have no right to rename the property, no right to sell naming rights, and certainly no right to install a sign without our permission." I watched Deborah's expression cycle through emotions, denial, anger, fear, then something harder to read. Calculation, maybe. "Even if what you're saying is true," she said slowly, "we've already accepted the money. We've made commitments based on that funding. We've ordered the sign, hired the caterers, invited the media. Breaking the contract now would expose the HOA to legal liability." Your fraud exposed the HOA to legal liability, I said. But here's what we're willing to do. Cancel the ceremony, return Mr. Morrison's money with a full explanation and apology, issue a community-wide correction explaining that the lake is privately owned, and resign from the HOA board. You can't demand that I resign. We're not demanding. We're offering you a way out of this that doesn't involve criminal charges for fraud and theft by deception. Because make no mistake, Mrs. Patterson, if that ceremony happens on Saturday, if that sign goes up on my property, I will have you arrested. I will sue you personally for every penny you're worth, and I will make sure everyone in this community knows exactly what you did. The room was silent. Frank set the deeds down carefully. Deborah, I think you should consider their offer. This is serious. If you knowingly sold something that wasn't ours to sell, that's criminal fraud. I didn't know, Deborah said, but her voice lacked conviction. I thought the lake was community property. Then show us your research, the dark-haired board member said. Show us the title search you did, the property records you reviewed. Because if you can prove you made an honest mistake, that's very different from fraud. Deborah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to prove anything to you people. This meeting is adjourned. She grabbed her purse and walked out, heels clicking sharply on the tile floor. The room erupted in conversation again. Frank looked at Dad apologetically. I'm so sorry. She told us she'd verified ownership. She presented it as a done deal, a fantastic opportunity. We trusted her. Do you have records of her communications with Tom Morrison? Dad asked. They should be in the HOA files, emails, contracts, everything. We're going to need copies of all of it, and we're going to need an emergency board vote to cancel Saturday's ceremony. The dark-haired board member nodded. I'll make a motion right now. All in favor of immediately canceling the lake naming ceremony and beginning a full investigation into the ownership situation? 4 hands went up. Only Deborah's seat was empty. Motion passes, Frank said. Mr. Jenkins, both of you will cooperate fully. This is horrifying. We had no idea. We spent the next 2 hours at the community center, going through files, making copies of everything. The paper trail was damning. Deborah had first mentioned the naming rights idea in a board meeting 8 months ago. According to the minutes, Frank had asked about ownership verification, and Deborah had said she would handle it. The next month, she'd presented a proposal showing the lake as HOA property, complete with fabricated property records that showed the lake as part of the common areas. These are fake, Dad said, examining the documents. Look at the deed number. That's not how they format them in this county. And the survey map is completely wrong. The boundaries don't match. How did we not catch this? Frank asked, looking sick. Because you trusted your president. Because most people don't have a real estate attorney's eye for this kind of detail. And because Deborah was counting on no one questioning her. The emails between Deborah and Tom Morrison were professional, friendly, and completely fraudulent. She'd represented herself as having full authority to sell naming rights. She'd provided the fake property records to Tom as proof of ownership. She'd even had the HOA's attorney draw up a contract, though based on the notes in the file, the attorney had never been shown the actual property deeds and had relied on Deborah's representation that everything was legitimate. She's going to jail, I said quietly. This isn't a mistake. This is deliberate, systematic fraud. Dad nodded grimly. We need to call the police, and Tom Morrison needs to know what happened. I called Tom from the parking lot while Dad finished up inside. He answered on the second ring. William, hello. Did you speak with the HOA? We did. Tom, I'm sorry to tell you this, but it's worse than we thought. The HOA president, Deborah Patterson, fabricated property records to make it look like the HOA owned the lake. She knew it was fraud. We have the paper trail. Tom was quiet for a long moment. I gave her $50,000 based on forged documents. Yes, the HOA board is cooperating. They've canceled Saturday's ceremony and they're going to return your money, but we think you should press charges. This is fraud. She belongs in prison. Damn right I'm pressing charges. I'll call my attorney tonight. William, I'm sorry your family got caught up in this. That lake should never have been touched. We appreciate that. And Tom, for what it's worth, the HOA board members seem like good people who got conned. It was all Deborah. After we hung up, I leaned against my car and stared up at the night sky. It was clear, stars visible despite the suburban light pollution. Somewhere a few streets away was the lake, My lake, my family's lake. Still there, still ours. Dad came out 20 minutes later, carrying a box of copied documents. Frank is calling an attorney first thing tomorrow morning. The HOA needs legal counsel for this, separate from Deborah. They're going to return Tom's money immediately before any charges are filed to show good faith. What about Deborah? Frank tried calling her. She's not answering. I suspect she knows how much trouble she's in. We went home. I filled Sarah in on everything, watched her expressions shift from shock to anger to grim satisfaction. So it's over? She asked. The ceremony is canceled. The sign won't go up, but the legal stuff is just beginning. Good. I hope they throw the book at her. The next morning, I drove down to the lake. It was 7 a.m., cool and quiet, mist rising off the water. The lake was maybe 2 acres of open water, surrounded by trees on 3 sides and a small beach area on the 4th. The beach had been improved by the HOA, which was fine with us, part of the easement agreement. Residents could swim, fish, kayak. We'd never had a problem with the arrangement, until now. I walked around the perimeter, checking everything. No sign installation yet, no construction. I found the spot where they'd probably planned to put it, a cleared area near the main path. There were surveyor's stakes in the ground, orange flags marking the location. I pulled them all up. My phone rang. Frank from the HOA board. William, I wanted to give you a heads up. Deborah showed up at my house this morning. She's threatening to sue the HOA and you personally if we don't go through with the ceremony. She says we're in breach of contract with Tom Morrison and she'll make sure we're all held liable. She's bluffing. She has to be. That's what I figured, but I thought you should know. She's desperate. Thanks for the warning. I called Dad immediately. Deborah's threatening lawsuits. She's going to fight this. Let her. We have the deeds. We have the truth. All she has is forged documents and a $50,000 hole she can't explain. But Dad was worried. I could hear it in his voice. Desperate people did unpredictable things. That afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mr. Jenkins, this is Deborah Patterson. I think we got off on the wrong foot last night. Mrs. Patterson, you committed fraud. There's no good foot to get off on. I made a mistake. I genuinely believed the lake was community property. But we can fix this. What if we compromised? Morrison Financial Solutions Lake on the sign, but a small plaque acknowledging your family's ownership. You'd still own the property, we'd fulfill our contract, everyone wins. No. Mr. Jenkins, be reasonable. I've already spent $15,000 of that money on community improvements. If I have to return it all, it's going to cause serious problems for the HOA budget. Your neighbors will suffer. You spent money you obtained through fraud. That's not my problem. That's not my neighbor's problem. That's your problem. I could make things very difficult for you. HOA bylaws give us a lot of power over residents. I could start citing you for violations, make your life miserable. And I could have you arrested today instead of giving you a chance to fix this quietly. Your choice, Mrs. Patterson. She hung up. My hands were shaking. Sarah came into my office, saw my face. That was her, wasn't it? Yeah. She tried to negotiate, then threatened me. What a piece of work. Are you okay? I'm furious. She spent $15,000 already. She's desperate because she can't return all of Tom's money without exposing her theft, so now she's trying to bully us into letting her keep up the fraud. What are you going to do? Call the police. File a formal complaint. This ends now. The Meadowbrook Police Department took my statement that afternoon. Detective Ray Coleman listened to everything, examined the deeds, reviewed the emails and fake property records that Frank had provided. This is pretty clear-cut fraud, he said. $50,000 puts it in felony territory. Grand theft, theft by deception, forgery of property records. She's looking at serious prison time if convicted. When can you arrest her? I'll get a warrant today. We'll pick her up tomorrow morning. She threatened me this afternoon, told me she could make my life difficult using HOA bylaws. Detective Coleman raised an eyebrow. That could be considered witness intimidation. Did you record the call? No, but I can provide phone records showing she called me. Do that. It'll strengthen the case. I left the police station feeling lighter than I had in days. This was really happening. Deborah Patterson was going to face consequences. That night, at nearly midnight, my phone rang again. Dad. William, turn on your security cameras, check the lake. What? Why? Just do it. I pulled up the camera app on my phone. We'd installed security cameras around the lake perimeter 2 years ago after some teenagers had gotten drunk and left trash everywhere. The cameras fed to a cloud service accessible from anywhere. I clicked on the camera that covered the main beach area and felt my blood go cold. Deborah Patterson was at the lake with 2 men and a van. They were unloading the sign. The Morrison Financial Solutions lake sign, massive and expensive looking. They were setting it up right where those surveyor stakes had been. Are you seeing this? Dad asked. Yeah, I'm calling the police right now. Already did. They're on their way. But William, I'm going down there. She's on our property, installing a sign without permission. That's trespassing and vandalism. Dad, wait for the police. I'm just going to watch. I won't engage. But someone needs to document this. I'm coming too. Give me 5 minutes. Sarah grabbed my arm as I was heading for the door. Be careful. That woman is unhinged. Police are on the way. We're just going to observe. I made it to the lake in 3 minutes. Dad was already there, standing at the edge of the tree line, phone out, recording video. The 2 men with Deborah had the sign halfway installed, digging post holes, mixing concrete. The sign itself was propped against a tree, illuminated by portable work lights. It was huge, professionally made, with Morrison Financial Solutions in gold lettering. Deborah saw us and marched over. You're trespassing. This is an HOA function. You're trespassing, I said. This is my property. You don't have permission to be here, and you certainly don't have permission to install that sign. The ceremony is happening Saturday, whether you like it or not. The contract is signed. We have obligations. The ceremony was canceled by the HOA board. You know this. The board doesn't have authority to cancel contracts I negotiated as president. I'm moving forward. Dad kept recording. You're installing a permanent structure on private property without permission. That's criminal trespassing and vandalism. The police are on their way. You called the police? For the first time, Deborah looked uncertain. This is an HOA matter. This is civil, not criminal. Fraud is criminal. Trespassing is criminal. Forgery is criminal. You've committed 6 crimes, Mrs. Patterson, and you're committing another one right now. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. The 2 men installing the sign looked at each other, then at Deborah. You said this was all approved, one of them said nervously. You said the property owner gave permission. Just keep working, Deborah snapped. Madam, if the police are coming, I'm not installing this sign. I'm not getting arrested for your property dispute. Both men started packing up their tools. Deborah's face was red, her carefully controlled demeanor completely shattered. You're all going to regret this, she said. I'll sue every single one of you. I'll take your house, your property, everything. With what money? Dad asked calmly. You stole $50,000 and already spent part of it. You're about to be arrested for multiple felonies. You won't have money for attorneys. You'll be lucky if you avoid prison. 2 patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing. Detective Coleman got out of one of them, looking tired and annoyed. He saw the sign, the work lights, Deborah standing there looking furious and desperate, and shook his head. Mrs. Patterson, we were coming to arrest you in the morning. You just made this a lot worse for yourself. Arrest me? For what? I'm performing my duties as HOA president. The HOA board canceled the ceremony and revoked your authority to act on their behalf. You're here illegally, attempting to install a sign on private property without permission. That's trespassing and attempted vandalism. Add that to the fraud charges we were already filing. He pulled out handcuffs. Deborah Patterson, you're under arrest for fraud, theft by deception, forgery, criminal trespassing, and attempted vandalism. You have the right to remain silent. Deborah tried to back away. This is insane. I'm a respected member of this community. You can't arrest me. Madam, don't make this harder than it has to be. She ran, actually turned, and ran toward the woods. She made it maybe 20 feet before a patrol officer caught up with her and brought her down with a tackle that would have made a linebacker proud. They cuffed her while she screamed about lawyers and lawsuits and police brutality. The 2 guys who'd been installing the sign stood there, looking shell-shocked. Detective Coleman took their statements. They were contractors from a sign company, hired by Deborah, paid a deposit from her personal account. They had no idea about the property dispute, the fraud, any of it. "Can we just load this sign back up and leave?" one of them asked. "Yeah, go ahead. We might need to talk to you again, but you're not in trouble." They packed up fast and drove away. Detective Coleman examined the partially dug post holes, shook his head again. "Mr. Jenkins, do you want to press charges for the trespassing and attempted vandalism?" "Absolutely. We'll add it to the list. This woman's going to be in jail for a while." They took Deborah away in a patrol car, still yelling threats. Dad and I stood by the lake in the sudden quiet, work lights still glowing, post holes half dug. "I need a drink," Dad said. "It's 1 a.m. "I don't care. Come on, we're going to my place. We're having whiskey." We sat on Dad's back porch until 3 a.m., drinking the good stuff from the bottle Grandpa had given him 20 years ago. We talked about Grandpa, about great-grandpa William, about the lake and what it meant to our family. "He'd be proud of you," Dad said, "standing up for this place. He always said the lake was worth fighting for." "I can't believe she actually tried to install the sign at midnight. Who does that?" "Someone who's desperate and stupid. She knew she was caught. She was trying to force a fait accompli, make it too expensive and complicated to undo. If that sign had gone up, if the ceremony had happened, it would have been messy to unravel. She was gambling that we'd give up rather than fight. She doesn't know us very well." "No, she doesn't." The next few days were a blur of phone calls, police statements, and media attention. A local news station got wind of the story and ran a piece titled HOA, President Arrested for Fraud Over Lake Naming Rights. The reporter interviewed Tom Morrison, who was gracious and sympathetic, making it clear he'd been deceived and was cooperating with authorities. They interviewed Frank from the HOA board, who apologized to the community and to our family. And they interviewed me, standing by the lake with the old wooden sign that had been there for decades, hand-carved by my grandfather. Harrison Lake, established 1947. "This lake is my family's legacy," I told the camera. "My great-grandfather built it as a gathering place, a place of peace. It's been in our family for 78 years. No amount of money, no corporate sponsor, no HOA president can change that." The story went viral locally, then picked up by state news, then national news outlets started calling. Everyone loved the angle. Little guy fights HOA corruption. 3 generations of deeds prove ownership. Dramatic midnight arrest. We did interviews with newspapers, radio stations, even a podcast about HOA horror stories. The community response was overwhelmingly supportive. Neighbors I barely knew stopped by to apologize for what Deborah had done, to thank us for standing up to her. Apparently, she'd been making a lot of people miserable with petty rule enforcement and power plays. Our fight had given everyone else permission to push back. The HOA held an emergency election. Frank became the new president. One of his first acts was to commission a new sign for the lake, a beautiful carved wooden piece that read, "Harrison Lake, private property of the Jenkins family. Public access granted through easement. Thank you for respecting our home." Tom Morrison's company returned all the money Deborah had spent, taking the loss themselves as a goodwill gesture. They also donated an additional $20,000 to the community for playground equipment, no naming rights required. Tom and I became friends. He came out to fish at the lake a few times, said it reminded him of his childhood in Wisconsin. Deborah's court case took months to wind through the system. She was charged with 8 felonies, 3 counts of fraud, 2 counts of forgery, theft by deception, criminal trespassing, and witness intimidation. Her attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't interested in going easy. The case was too public, too clear-cut. Deborah had committed deliberate systematic fraud and then tried to cover it up with more crimes. The trial lasted a week. Dad and I both testified. Tom Morrison testified. The contractor who'd been hired to install the sign testified. Frank and the other HOA board members testified. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and found her guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge was not sympathetic. "Mrs. Patterson, you held a position of trust in your community. You were elected to serve your neighbors, to manage common resources responsibly and ethically. Instead, you engaged in a calculated scheme to defraud both a local businessman and the homeowners you were supposed to represent. You forged documents, lied repeatedly, and when caught, you tried to intimidate witnesses and complete your fraud under cover of darkness. This court has no tolerance for that kind of behavior. He sentenced her to 6 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 3. She also had to pay full restitution to Tom Morrison, plus fines, plus legal fees. Her husband filed for divorce 2 weeks after the sentencing. Her adult children reportedly stopped speaking to her. The fall from respected community leader to convicted felon was complete. I wish I could say I felt sorry for her. I didn't. She'd tried to steal my family's history, to erase my great-grandfather's legacy for money and ego. She'd earned every consequence that came her way. Life returned to normal, slowly. The media attention faded. The new HOA board was competent and respectful. Frank called before making any decisions that might affect the lake, even though he didn't have to. The relationship between our family and the HOA was stronger than it had ever been, built on clear boundaries and mutual respect. On a Saturday morning in August, 6 months after the whole mess had started, my family gathered at the lake. Dad was there, of course, my wife Sarah, my 2 kids, ages 7 and 9, my sister Jennifer and her family, who'd driven in from Ohio for the weekend. About 40 people total, 3 generations of Jenkinses, and the friends who were close enough to be family. We were dedicating the new sign, the one the HOA had commissioned. It was gorgeous, carved from oak by a local artisan, with lettering that matched the style of Grandpa's original sign. Both signs now stood together at the main entrance to the lake, old and new, past and present. Frank gave a short speech about community and respect and learning from mistakes. Tom Morrison was there, and he talked about the importance of doing your due diligence and making things right when you've been part of something wrong, even inadvertently. Dad spoke about Grandpa and Great-Grandpa William, about legacy and fighting for what matters. Then it was my turn. I stood there looking at the lake, at the sunlight dancing on the water, at my kids playing on the beach, at the faces of people I loved gathered around. And I felt Grandpa's presence. He'd stood in this same spot countless times. He'd taught me to fish right over there by those cattails. He'd told me stories about his father digging the lake, creating something from nothing, building a legacy. My great-grandfather came home from World War II with dreams and determination, I said. He bought this land, dug this lake with his own hands in a borrowed excavator, and created a place where his family could gather for generations. He called it Harrison Lake, after himself. And that was never about ego. It was about leaving something behind that mattered, something that would outlast him. I looked at my kids splashing in the shallow water. 4 generations of William Jays have taken care of this place. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, my father, and now me. The lake has been swimming pool and fishing hole, wedding venue and memorial site, classroom and playground. It's where we come for peace. It's where we come to remember who we are. My voice got thick. I cleared my throat. Someone tried to take that away from us, tried to erase the name, erase the history, turn our family's heart into a corporate advertisement, and we fought back, not because we're against progress or community improvement, but because some things aren't for sale, some things you protect no matter the cost. This lake is one of those things. Sarah squeezed my hand. Dad was crying openly, not even trying to hide it. So this sign, I continued, gesturing to the new carved oak piece, represents a promise that as long as there are Jenkinses here, Harrison Lake will remain Harrison Lake. Our doors open, our water is yours to enjoy, but our history, our name, our legacy, those stay with us. Thank you all for being here, for supporting us, for understanding why this matters so much. We unveiled the sign together, me and Dad and my kids, 4 generations pulling the cloth away in unison. Everyone clapped. Someone started playing music. Kids jumped in the water. Adults broke out the food and drinks. The gathering turned into a party, spontaneous and joyful, exactly the kind of thing Great-Grandpa William had envisioned when he dug the lake 78 years ago. I found Dad sitting on the dock an hour later, feet dangling in the water, beer in hand. He'd be proud, Dad said again. You keep saying that. Because it's true. You know what your grandfather told me when I inherited this property? He said, the lake will be tested. Someone will always want to take it, change it, use it for their own purposes. Your job is to hold the line, protect it for the next generation." I thought he was being paranoid. Turns out he knew exactly what he was talking about. Did you ever doubt we'd win? Against the law? No. We had the deeds, the truth. But there were moments I worried about the cost. Litigation is expensive, even when you're right. If Deborah had been smarter, if she'd dragged it out, fought harder, it could have bankrupted us defending what's ours. But it didn't. No, she overplayed her hand, got greedy and desperate and made mistakes. We got lucky. We got justice. Sometimes they're the same thing. My daughter ran up, dripping wet, gap-toothed grin splitting her face. "Dad, Papa, come swim. The water's perfect." Dad set down his beer. "Your grandfather never said no to swimming. Come on." We jumped in together, 3 generations of Jenkins men splashing and laughing in water my great-grandfather had put there. My daughter climbed on my shoulders. My son tried to dunk Dad. Sarah took pictures from the dock. The sun was warm, the water cool, the moment perfect. I dove under, opened my eyes, saw the murky green-brown of lake water and fish darting past. When I came up, I floated on my back, staring at the sky, and thought about what we'd protected. Not just property, not just water and land, but the idea that some things endure. That family matters. That history matters. That you don't let people take what's yours without a fight. Harrison Lake. Established 1947. Still here. Still ours. Still the heart of the Jenkins family. And that sign, the one Deborah Patterson had tried to install at midnight, the Morrison Financial Solutions Lake sign, we'd kept it. Had it cut down to a more reasonable size, reframed, and donated it to Tom Morrison's office lobby. He'd hung it with a plaque underneath that read, "A reminder to always verify ownership before buying naming rights, and a testament to the Jenkins family's dedication to preserving their legacy." Tom said clients asked about it all the time. He told them the whole story, used it as a teaching moment about due diligence and ethics and making things right when you mess up. That sign, intended to erase our family's name, became instead a permanent memorial to the fact that we'd won. The party went until sunset. People started packing up slowly, reluctantly, not wanting the day to end. Frank pulled me aside before he left. "William, I want to thank you again. Not just for not suing the HOA into oblivion, which you could have done, but for showing us what leadership actually looks like. Deborah was president for 3 years, and in that time, she made people afraid. Afraid to question her, afraid to challenge her, afraid to make waves. You stood up to her with 3 pieces of old paper and the truth, and you took her down. You gave the rest of us courage. Frank, you didn't do anything wrong. You were deceived. I should have checked. I was lazy. I trusted her because it was easier than verifying. That's on me. But I'm trying to do better now. We all are. The new board is doing great. Honestly, the HOA and my family have never had a better relationship. That's because we remember what happens when we overstep. It's a good lesson, a necessary one." After everyone left, Sarah and I walked the perimeter of the lake one more time. The new sign glowed in the dusk, solar lights making the carved letters stand out. Harrison Lake, our name, our place. "Are you glad it's over?" Sarah asked. "Yeah, but I'm more glad we won." That sounds petty maybe, but it's true. If we'd lost, if somehow Deborah had gotten away with it, I don't think I could have stayed here. I couldn't have driven by this lake every day and seen some corporation's name on it. It wouldn't have been the same place anymore. Exactly. Places are more than just geography. They're the stories we attach to them, the memories, the meaning. Deborah wanted to strip all that away, make it generic, make it commercial. She didn't understand what she was really trying to take. I'm proud of you. You and your dad. You fought for something that mattered. I had good teachers, Grandpa, great-grandpa. They all understood that some fights are worth having, even when they're hard, even when they cost you something. We sat on the dock and watched the stars come out, reflected in the dark water. Somewhere out in the middle, a fish jumped, the splash echoing across the lake. An owl called from the trees. The night was alive with the sounds of a healthy ecosystem, one that my great-grandfather had created and 4 generations had maintained. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked. About my kids. About whether they'll fight for this place when it's their turn, whether they'll understand why it matters. They will. You're teaching them the same way your grandfather taught you. They're learning that some things are worth protecting, that family history matters, that you don't back down when you're right. I hope so. I want them to feel about this place the way I do, the way Dad does, the way Grandpa did. They will. I see it already. The way your daughter tells people, "This is my great-great-grandpa's lake." The pride in her voice, she gets it. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. "Today was perfect. Grandpa would have loved it. So would his father. Thank you for fighting for them, for all of us. Love you, son." I texted back, "Love you too, Dad. We did good." Sarah and I walked back to the house eventually, tired and sun-tired and happy. The whole ordeal, from that first email notification to today's party, had taken 7 months. 7 months of stress, anger, police reports, court dates, and media attention. 7 months of fighting for what was ours. And we'd won. Not just in court, not just legally, but completely. The lake was still Harrison Lake. The family name was still on the sign. The legacy was intact. Great-Grandpa William's dream had survived. More than that, it had grown stronger. The community understood now, in a way they hadn't before, what the lake really meant. It wasn't just a nice amenity in the neighborhood. It was history, family, legacy. It was a place worth fighting for. I thought about Deborah Patterson sometimes, sitting in prison, probably still convinced she'd done nothing wrong. People like her never really understood why they failed. They saw the world as a series of transactions, opportunities to exploit, advantages to gain. They didn't understand that some things couldn't be bought or sold or renamed. Some things just were, permanent and enduring, beyond the reach of schemes and fraud. Harrison Lake was one of those things, and my family were its guardians, now and always. The following spring, Dad and I started a new tradition. On the anniversary of Great-Grandpa William breaking ground on the lake, we held a family gathering. We told the stories, showed the old photos, explained the history. We made sure the next generation understood where they came from, what their ancestors had built, what their parents had fought to protect. At the first of these gatherings, my daughter stood up in front of everyone, all of 7 years old, and said, "This is Harrison Lake. My great-great-great-grandpa built it, and nobody can ever change its name because it's ours forever." Forever. That's a long time. But looking at her face, so certain and proud, I believed her. This lake had survived 78 years so far. It had survived development, suburbanization, HOA politics, and outright fraud. It would survive whatever came next because each generation would fight for it the way we'd fought. That was the real legacy. Not the water or the property lines or the deeds, important as those were. The legacy was the willingness to stand up and say, "This matters, this is worth protecting, this is ours." To face down people like Deborah Patterson and win. To teach our children to do the same. 3 generations of deeds had saved Harrison Lake, but it was 4 generations of Jenkinses, past, present, and future, who would keep it safe. And that was worth every sleepless night, every legal bill, every moment of stress and anger and fear. That was worth everything. The lake reflected the sunset that evening, turning the water into liquid gold. Dad stood beside me at the water's edge, my kids splashing nearby, Sarah taking photos, family all around. "We did good, son," Dad said quietly. "Yeah," I agreed. "We really did." And somewhere, I like to think, Great-Grandpa William and Grandpa William were watching, were proud, were at peace, knowing their lake, their legacy, their heart was safe for another generation. Harrison Lake, established 1947, protected 2026, forever ours.